In this lesson, we're going to be discussing basic sketching techniques. A parametric sketch forms the base of each parametric part you create in Autodesk Inventor. Unlike 2D sketches that you create in AutoCAD or other non-parametric 2D applications, when you create a 2D sketch in Inventor, you immediately begin to add intelligence to your design. This also helps you capture the design intent. A parametric sketch consists of 2D geometry in which constraints are applied to control the size and potential behavior of the 2D geometry. There are two different types of constraints: geometric constraints and dimensional constraints. As you create geometry in Autodesk Inventor, some geometric constraints are automatically applied. Let's take a look. I'm going to go up to the New command, select the standard IPT, select Create. From here, I'm going to start a new 2D sketch. I'm going to select on my base plane. As I start to draw, you'll notice these little glyphs down by my cursor. What these are Inventor trying to automatically apply geometric constraints to your drawing. The geometric constraint beside my cursor currently tells me that this line is always going to be held in a horizontal position. This is in relationship to the sketch and its current orientation. No matter what I do to the sketch, until I delete this constraint, it'll always be held horizontal. If I start to draw an arc, I get a glyph down there at the base telling me that it's going to be tangent to the existing line. So I keep going. This line, not only will it be tangent, but it'll also be parallel to the other line. Now you will notice at the end it's giving me a dotted line, and basically that's an implied constraint, meaning that it's not actually going to put something on there, but it allows me the next operation to come down and go a perpendicular line and then it meet up perfectly. It's kind of like OSNAP and the object snap tracking in AutoCAD, if you're familiar with that. It's just a little helper tool to let you close off the geometry correctly. Once you're happy with the geometric constraints you've added to your drawing, then you can add dimensional constraints. As I'm sketching, I get the implied constraints. But how do I know what constraints have been applied later on down the road? Or even in this drawing, it's hard to remember what I've just done. If I hit Escape to get out of the line command, I can come up to this little glyph up here that says Show Constraints. Click on that, and then I can select on each line individually, and it'll tell me what constraints are assigned to that line. Likewise, if I hit Escape and I right-click, I can go down to Hide or Show All Constraints and see all the constraints in the drawing. The same command is available in the function key F8 for Show All Constraints and function key F9 to hide all constraints. Now, because the constraints are not shown, they are still implied to the drawing. So if I come in here and try to do something, I can't modify the geometric constraints even though they're not shown up. They just turn that off for convenience. So remember, if your drawing's doing something you don't expect it to do and you can't figure out why it's doing something, do a quick F8 and see if it's automatically added a geometric constraint that you weren't expecting. To remove one of the geometric constraints, simply highlight it, hit delete on your keyboard, or you can click on it and right click and it'll give you delete command. And so now that constraint is no longer there. I can actually warp and change the shape of my design. Once we get the sketch fully geometrically constrained, then we move on to the dimensional constraints. With Inventor, you always start with the geometric. What you do is you draw something out, you get your basic shape how you want it, and then you start adding the geometric constraints and then the dimensional constraints. Those of you who are familiar with AutoCAD may not seem intuitive to design this way. In AutoCAD, you had to draw everything out and create these precise sketches that didn't have any intelligence in them. So you could only do it one time, and then you had to go back and manually modify stuff. In Inventor, you get the design intent first by sketching out your basic shape, and then you start refining that design intent by adding geometric constraints, and then later with dimensional constraints. The dimensional constraints in Inventor are intelligent constraints. If I say 2 inches here, and I decide that I need this to be smaller or larger, by editing the actual dimension, it will actually edit my geometry as well. This is intelligent design. This means that this has the intelligence to remember how you designed it. Now, as you design and draw in a sketch environment in Inventor, you do get the direct input option. You'll notice there the little blue highlighted box. I can type in a number. If I hit enter, it will automatically draw that line at that distance that I created it. The other option when you're drawing with precise input is you can also add angles and other direct input options. So if I type in 1, then tab over to the angle, I can manually type in an angle. If I'm not happy with it, I can tab back to it, 85, tab over, and that will update my drawing. I can either hit enter to accept it, or I can left mouse pick and then move on to the next line. Ideally, those of you who are new to Inventor, that is, I highly encourage you not to do precise input. It's better to learn how to freeform sketch and get used to that. Whenever we're sketching something out, I start a new drawing here, get a good clean slate, standard IPT, select create, select new drawing. If I'm drawing something out and I'm having to worry about what size it is, it's taking away from my design intent. So whenever I draw this out, for example, I can even hold down Control and not even have geometric constraints placed. I can draw some hideous sketch, and Inventor doesn't care. Close it off there. Looks nothing like the finished product, but it looks close enough that I can start adding my constraints and controlling it. Once again, I'll add my geometric constraints first. I can start controlling how I want this to look. Then I would add my dimensional constraints and make sure that everything is fully constrained. A fully constrained sketch is very important in Inventor, and we'll get into that in the Creating 2D Sketches lesson.